Can you Are we ready? Can you please take your seats, please? Can you please take your seats, please?
Thank you very much for joining us. This is a rather short session. We only have a half an hour, but it is an important issue. We do want to really use the time to emphasize the need to invest in all components of early warning. My name is Loretta Heber-Girardet. I am the chief of UNDRR's Risk Knowledge Branch, and I'm also leading Pillar 1 of the Early Warnings for All initiative. And we have, as I mentioned, just a half an hour, but we wanted to use this opportunity to highlight the need for greater investment in understanding risk as part of Early Warnings for All, but also to present to you the development of a handbook that we have done in cooperation with the Chima Foundation, our colleagues are here today, on using risk information to improve early warning systems. We're going to start today's session with a brief video that gives an update on the status of early warning. A presentation will be followed, but first we will have a keynote address by our speaker from the government of Tonga, and then we will have a panel as well that will be talking a bit about why risk knowledge is important. So with no further ado, we will begin with the short video. Thank you.
Timely early warnings can be the difference between life and death. Countries with good multi-hazard early warning system coverage are much safer. 5 times fewer people are affected by disasters in such countries. At COP27, the UN Secretary-General launched an ambitious plan to expand early warning systems to protect every person, everywhere, by 2027. Are we on track? Global status reports keep track of progress aided by continuous monitoring via an online dashboard. The report notes significant progress, but also major gaps, and targets priority areas for improvement. While the number of countries with early warning systems is steadily increasing, the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states are lagging. Strong risk governance mechanisms are key to enabling progress. 101 countries report having multi-hazard early warning systems as of 2023. Countries with more comprehensive DRR strategies have higher coverage of early warnings. Risk knowledge plays a vital role. Countries need support in building a people-centric approach to data, technology, and connectivity capacity to give warnings earlier and make sure hard-to-reach communities are alerted so that no one is left behind.
Okay, so this short video, it relates to a report that we put out that we launched this week here at COP on the status of early warnings. And you may be familiar with early warning systems. There are 4 pillars. This report indicates that, again this year, risk knowledge is the least resourced pillar. That is why we really want to focus more attention on the need for countries to invest in understanding risk as the foundation for effective early warning systems. So I'm very pleased to ask Ms. Mona Kiowa, who's the Principal Assistant Secretary for Disaster Risk Management at the National Emergency Management Office in Tonga, to offer some initial keynote remarks. I know the time is short, but we are very well aware that Tonga has experienced several high-level disasters. And we'd like to understand from your perspective why improved risk knowledge is so important.
Thank you, Loretta. Good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues and friends. I bring to you warm greetings from the Pacific Islands. I'm grateful for the opportunity to take part in this session, which also marks a momentous initiative. Tonga and many of its neighboring Pacific Island countries stands at a crossroads in their pursuit to build resilience. We continue to grapple with the significant threats posed by catastrophic climate-related hazards such as cyclones, tsunamis, volcanic eruption, and sea level rise. For many years, we have been the third most vulnerable country globally. But our risk extends beyond statistical rankings to the stark realities faced by our communities, especially the most vulnerable among us, who bear the disproportionate burden of climate change. If I may, I want to request to take a moment to reflect on what this means for our people. Exactly a year ago, Tonga experienced the most devastating volcanic eruption and tsunami event that displaced hundreds of families. Whole communities had to be relocated because their homes are no longer habitable. Imagine being in that situation. Against this backdrop, we recognize the criticality of early warning systems, which are not just tools, but indispensable survival lifelines. We acknowledge an imperative to amplify our efforts. Tonga, in its commitment to safeguard its people, recognizes the urgency to scale up investments, foster technological advancement, and expedite the implementation of end-to-end, multi-hazard and multi-stakeholder early warning systems. This essence lies in reaching the last mile, ensuring that the most at-risk individuals and communities are not just recipients of warnings, but active participants in a comprehensive resilience strategy. In this endeavor, Tonga welcomes the Early Warnings for All initiative with open arms. This initiative and its ambitious global target to protect everyone on Earth aligns seamlessly with our commitment to strengthening efforts of collective resilience. Early Warnings for All holds the promise of linking and scaling up existing efforts, fostering collaboration, synergies, and alignment, all essential elements in fortifying our defenses against the multifaceted challenges we confront. As we embark on this journey, the importance of risk knowledge becomes paramount. Tonga looks not only to the implementation of early warning systems, but also to elevate the level of risk knowledge that underpins them. The dissemination of this knowledge among the population is crucial. Recognizing the risk knowledge is not a one-size-fits-all concept. It requires a nuisance understanding that integrates indigenous wisdom with scientific insights, bridging the gap between expertise and community awareness. In this context, the handbook on the use of risk knowledge assumes profound significance. It serves as a guide and a compass, an instrument that empowers us to translate data into actionable insights, guiding decision-making at all levels of our society. As Tonga embraces the Early Warnings for All initiative, we recognize the handbook as a valuable tool in our collective arsenal against the challenges to the climate crisis and amplified disaster impact. To conclude, Tonga is not merely adapting to change. It is pioneering a path towards resilience that involves the entire community and recognizes the principles at last mile. Indeed, the challenges we face are immense, but so is our determination to build a more secure and resilient future for the people of Tonga. Together, through the Early Warnings for All initiative, enhanced risk knowledge, and the practical insights provided by the handbook, we stride towards a future where vulnerability is minimized and resilience prevails. Malo aupita, that is a Tongan way of saying thank you very much for the opportunity to share these remarks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for setting the stage. I would now like to invite our colleague, Mr. Roberto Rudari from the Chima Foundation, who will give a brief overview of the handbook.
Is that working? Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Loretta, for inviting us Thank you, Loretta, also for picking us as a technical partner for UNDRR to develop the handbook. And I'm thanking also Her Excellency from Tongo, I mean, really to set like the tone so that I'm not feeling the pressure. No, now I'm feeling the pressure even more, I mean, because expectation seems to be very high. Where we started, I mean, actually, I mean, going back and forth with UNDRR, trying to understand what they would expect, I mean, from the handbook. And they said, well, I mean, we should concentrate basically on the use of risk information and risk knowledge for early warning system. That is one of the risk knowledge outcome themes, I mean, that they have. But without I'm going to kill myself now, but I don't want to stand in front of the others. But without, basically without forgetting, as it was said also in the introduction, all cross-cutting outcomes, like, you know, the importance of open access to risk knowledge, the governance aspect, the inclusion of indigenous knowledge and local knowledge, and inclusivity in general, the innovation for risk knowledge, so all the aspects that are, you know, touched upon. So, I mean, we were very excited. Then they told us, well, this has to be done in 30 pages. So, I mean, in that case, I mean, it was a little bit challenging, I mean, for that. But apart from this, it's because, I mean, we wanted to do, I mean, something really concrete, something that can be really used by, let's say, states that would like, I mean, to implement an early warning system in principle. So a concrete tool at the basis. So we don't want like a theoretical document. We want something that can be really, setting the scene can be really helpful, I mean, for people that want to understand how risk knowledge can be important. What are the risk knowledge information that are really essential to the early warning system? Because, you know, risk knowledge production is wider, much wider than only AWS. And there are certain specific aspects that are really, I mean, important and focusing, I mean, on the early warning system part. To do that, it was not easy how to structure the document, so we tried, I mean, to really identify the processes within the early warning system that could be assisted by the risk information and risk knowledge, focusing also in their interconnected nature, because you will see, I mean, we always have this narrative of pillars, but I mean, processes are many times, you know, cross pillars, I mean, when you implement them. But maintaining this narrative, the handbook philosophy is really a pillar one product, okay, but really in support of the other pillars in general. So disaster knowledge really to assist monitoring and forecasting, to assist communication and dissemination, and to assist, of course, you know, the preparedness and response, I mean, components. The structure is more or less like that. So, I mean, there are processes that can be connected, I mean, to the other pillars. And we have, I mean, on one side, you know, observation and forecast. And in here, we tried, I mean, to touch upon, you know, different processes that highlight different paradigms that Billot identified, you know. So the hazard, I mean, type of approach to early warning, the more impact-based till, you know, the more evolved, I mean, impact forecast. And you will find that, I mean, in the three processes there. Also for dissemination and communication, we wanted to focus on how really define the warning message, better target the warning message, but also how to protect the communication system that actually, I mean, intends to deliver this warning message. In respect to the preparedness and response, this is maybe, you know, also the core, I mean, of that, because, I mean, if you think about, I mean, an early warning system, it's a process that is just, you know, a way to communicate a reference risk scenario that, I mean, we are fearing it might happen. So here is really, you know, process 7 is how to build, I mean, an effective reference scenario to be communicated. We also introduced in process 8 the support for a progressive activation of the early action. That is, I don't want to say quite a new concept, but in a sense, I mean, not very well detailed, I mean, in the literature so far, without, you know, leaving aside, I mean, all the cross-cutting issues. The structure of the handbook chapters, I mean, is very easy. I think, I mean, if you will open the handbook, you will always find, you know, a first part that details the relevant risk information in respect to the different processes and pillar. Identify, I mean, for each of the processes, key implementation steps as a sort of, you know, workflow, I mean, if you wish, and how, you know, risk information supports, I mean, each one of these key implementation steps. We would like then, to give the dimension of the good practices. We were discussing this just, before the session, because, it's easy to, let's say, detail the workflow, like, in theory, but, it's very important to show that this could be effectively implemented on the field. And, of course, all the cross-cutting issues are always included. The implementation in countries, is one very important part for the handbook. We are intending, to roll out, together with the UNDRR, let's say workshops, if you wish, where we will present, this handbook to the country. We will try to make them use that in order to learn, some lessons and include those lessons in the handbook itself. In fact, we would like, to maintain this as an open document, for a while, always in evolution, including new practices, trying to really, absorb the feedback from implementation and use in the countries, and hopefully, try, with the other pillar leads, to integrate these in other tools for the early warning for all suits. So this is more or less, what we have been trying to do. So let's hope that, this is really what, is concretely in the handbook. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Roberto. And as you can see, we are aiming for something very practical, very user-friendly, and really to push us towards really applying risk information and risk knowledge to improve early warning systems. So we have not very long, but I would like to get a bit of a reaction from our panelists, starting with Dr. Ram Kumar Dumria, who is the Deputy Director of the Mauritius Meteorological Services. And the question I'd like to know from you is, Dr. Dumria, what can be done to increase the investment in risk knowledge so that it really does become the foundation for inclusive end-to-end early warning systems?
Yeah, investment basically comes from, it's a sort of a proactive process, or it could be reactive also. So once we know what's happening, then we can invest accordingly. So what we observe nowadays is that most of the communities, especially for communities like small island developing states, right, we have been used to extensive risk. Those risks that happens oftentimes, but is not that critical. Mm-hmm. But we are very much less used to intensive risk. So this is, I think, some of the gaps we can observe, that people often with extensive risks, they're on the comfort zone. But when the intensive risk appear, we don't know how to react and how to invest. Mm-hmm. And then when we come to investment in itself, investment starts at the individual level. I need to know how to protect my house, how to protect my environment first. Mm-hmm. So if I don't know having a good idea of the different risks, extensive I know, but intensive I don't know. So how I'm going to invest in my own environment to protect my house and myself? Mm-hmm. Then the investment comes at national level, or it could be in regional level, so it depends where you are. But for us as a small state, it would be at national level. So I think this risk knowledge is very, very important for investment going from individual level up to national level. And then I would stress here, it is very important to make the intensive risk to be more visible as climate change is leading to more intensive risk now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those insights. We have been saying consistently that early warnings for all is all hands on deck, and this includes the private sector. So I'd now like to ask Mr. Juan Lavista Ferraz, who is the Vice President and Chief Data Scientist of the AI for Good Lab at Microsoft. If you could tell us, how do you see the private sector contributing specifically to Pillar 1 in risk knowledge?
Yes, so I think for us, the contribution is to help organizations like UNDRR and other organizations with either AI, like how do we get data, like better data into the hands of these organizations, correct? Mm-hmm. So like a good example, and this is something that we've been trying to work for some time now, is understanding where do people live, correct? Like we have the illusion, because we live in the 21st century, we have the illusion that we know where people live. And that's true in the global north, particularly in cities in the global north, but specifically in majority, a significant portion of the global south, particularly sub-Saharan Africa, a lot of these maps are completely out of date. The data can be 10, 15 years old. And that basically shows how important and how problematic it is. And we saw it firsthand when the earthquake happened in Afghanistan. A significant portion of the people that were affected by the earthquake were not in any map. So that's like, this is just one example. Another area that I think the private sector can contribute is, of course, on areas like satellite data, like trying to use this data to help better assess and create probability maps of disasters, but also to help bring the tools for the organizations so they can use. Those are some of the examples. I think to close on these and not necessarily related to the private sector, one thing that I am passionate about is I do think the understanding risk is critical, and also differentiating between things that we can predict and the things we cannot predict. A lot of times I feel that a lot of the discussions I've seen, when we talk about early warning for all, people have this illusion that says, I will have a system that will tell you that you will have this problem in the next 24 hours and you will be able to walk away. And that's true in some cases, but unfortunately there's a lot of cases where that you cannot predict if a dam will break. You can predict that there's going to be a big weather event. So this is why it's critical to differentiate between things that we can predict and forecast and between things that we cannot, but still have an understanding of why we need these risk maps and how we can change the behavior of people with these risk maps. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much for raising those points. I would now like to turn to my colleague on the left, Elham Yousafian, who is a human rights lawyer and also a fervent advocate for the inclusion of persons with disability, especially when addressing climate change. Born and raised in Iran, Yousafian is our guest today to really highlight the importance of inclusive approaches and why this is so critical for early warning systems.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So I work for the International Disability Alliance, which is the global network of organizations of people with disabilities. But today, I want to talk about the fact that risk knowledge is not going to be comprehensive and efficient if it's not inclusive of the way that different groups of society experience the disasters, the way that different groups of society would react to the disasters, the services they require, the measures they require, and how they can be protected. So let me give a couple of quick examples. So for example, for older persons, the amount of time provided between the time that the warning is provided until they can reach safety is longer than other people. And this needs to be considered as a risk factor. So for people with disabilities, for example, we have people who are deaf. They cannot hear their early warnings that are just by sound. They need information in a way that they can access it, including sign language that they speak, or written signs, including visual signs for them. For those who are blind, that's quite the opposite. They cannot see the lights, or if you just share a map that, okay, the cyclone is happening, and this is the map to reach the safe area. So how a blind person can see that? So these are the issues that, in order to make sure that we have a truly effective and useful risk knowledge, we need to consider. Otherwise, the risk knowledge is going to be just considering the mainstream people who are the dominant group in the society. That's what we call like a white, black, middle-aged man who is just able to access the information in a mainstream ways. So inclusive early warning system needs to consider that the society is not a homogeneous group. The society is composed of women, of girls, of people with different ages, children, young people, people with disabilities, indigenous people, people with, from different races and other groups. So that's how, and then also in consultation with these groups, the risk knowledge needs to include exactly what these people need to be able to really benefit from the early warning. And that's like accessing the information that, okay, there is a disaster happening is not enough. As we are all aware, early warning means knowing that what's going to happen, what are the risks that we are facing, what we should do, and how we should do it to protect ourselves. So I just wanted to highlight that for having a good database and a good knowledge, we need to bring all these different groups around the table. Those who are collecting knowledge need to consult and need to consider this diverse group. So colleague was just talking about the artificial intelligence, and I just want to highlight that these type of technologies would be super beneficial only if they consider that different groups of society have different needs. Otherwise, they would produce something that benefits a few people and leaves many more behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We only have around 2 minutes left, but I would like to turn to Mr. Vongkham Phanthuanvong, who is the Director General at the Department of Social Welfare from the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare in Lao, PDR, where I know early warning systems are under development, have been for some time. We're working in Lao. Some final reflections from you, sir, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderators, ladies and gentlemen. In Lao PDR's Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment and the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare work together to bring the stakeholders steer this initiative. So over the past 6 months of this year, we prune the force and across the government ministries, UN agencies, development partners, private sectors, and also CSO. We work together to understand our strengths and weaknesses and gaps that we must fill to achieve the early warning for all. So after multiple consultations, intensive analysis and discussions, we developed the early warning for all roadmap, so 5-year roadmap. So we will start from this year to until 2027. So with this roadmap, we will work together to mobilize resources to strengthen the international, institutional, and also technical capacity to early warning system. So the purpose of these activities, including strengthening legal and institutional instruments, promoting disaster knowledge, and across all sectors. So improving the real-time monitoring system, and also advanced technologies, and improving the emergency preparedness and response capacity at all levels, from national, from central to provincial and district levels. So, and let's say at a sub-national level. So from this perspective, the Ministry of Labor and Social Welfare serves as a National Secretariat for the Disaster Management Committee. So the availability of and also the capability of least knowledge is very critical. So help to direct the roadmap. For Laos, the early warning system in population is geographic areas are vulnerable in front of disaster. So the strong disaster statistics will help to monitor and effectiveness of early warning system over the time. So just as we plan to strengthen the national disaster loss and damages database and checking system of Lao PDR under this roadmap. So Lao PDR will have the early warning system roadmap that we expected to endorse by the by the government next year, 2024. So we hope that. And the early warning system roadmap is one of the key instruments that to implement our national strategy on disaster risk reductions, and which is the support to the 9th of National Economic and Development Plan. To implementation of this roadmap will be required sustainable technical and financial resources, and from this government as well as the external partners. We seek that the support from the global and regional agencies, especially global pillar leads, in accessing those necessary resources to complement the national efforts. So we look forward that continuing working with the multiple stakeholders for advanced early warning system. So initiative together. So I thank you very much, Madam. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have to wrap up. We had a very short amount of time, but we did want to highlight the importance of this issue. Risk knowledge is the foundation of effective, end-to-end, inclusive early warning, as we have heard. The good news is that this is not a handbook that's going to sit on a shelf. We are traveling next week to Ethiopia, where we'll be launching this along with our colleagues from Microsoft. Truly a partnership with the private sector, the public sector, the UN system, NGOs and others coming together in the very first country for the first Pillar 1 workshop as part of Early Warnings for All initiative. But we plan to replicate this in all the countries of Early Warnings for All to really make sure that all of the countries have a very solid understanding of risk as part of the overall launch and implementation of the Early Warnings for All initiative. So big thanks to the Chima Foundation, big thanks to our panel. And next year, we will be coming back and telling you more about our results. So thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I mean,